Alina, pause. Mr. Richard Thorne's voice pierced the evening air as he observed his housekeeper hasten down the mansion's front steps, shopping bags gripped in both hands. She turned back, her auburn hair catching the porch light. Yes, Mr. Thorne? Did I neglect something? He scrutinized her face, searching for indications of guilt. Those bags, what's contained within them? Alina's grasp tightened on the handles. Just some groceries I acquired during my lunch break. Is there an issue? You've been departing early frequently lately. Family emergencies, you stated. My mother is ill. I have informed you of this. Richard stepped closer. And you require more funds? I overheard you on the telephone yesterday. Alina's cheeks flushed. I do not comprehend what you are inquiring. I am not inquiring. I am asserting. I know something is transpiring. For a moment, they stood in tense silence. Alina adjusted her bags and lifted her chin. If you do not trust me, Mr. Thorne, perhaps you should seek someone else to maintain your residence. She turned and walked away, her footsteps echoing on the pavement. Richard watched her vanish around the corner, his jaw clenched. Back inside his sterile mansion, Richard poured himself a glass of whiskey and stared out at the city skyline. The house felt like a fortress, which was precisely how he designed it after learning that wealth transformed everyone into a potential adversary. His phone buzzed. Mr. Liam Chun, his assistant and only genuine confidant. Any fortune with the background verification on Alina? Richard inquired without greeting. Impeccable, Mr. Thorne. But Marcus, you are succumbing to paranoia again. She has been employed by you for 8 months without incident. Recall Ms. Evelyn? Impeccable background, too. Still departed with my grandmother's jewelry. That was 3 housekeepers ago and 2 romantic partners ago. You cannot exist like this perpetually. Richard terminated the call and walked to his home office. Security monitors displayed vacant corridors and spotless rooms. Everything in its proper place. Everything controlled. Everything solitary. He opened his laptop and accessed Alina's employment file. Alina Suarez, 29. References verified. Social Security validated. But there were discrepancies. Evening activities unaccounted for. That telephone conversation yesterday, in rapid Spanish, where he'd caught the phrases more difficult, more money. Then there was the receipt he discovered in her jacket pocket when he'd offered to hang it up, $500 wired to El Salvador. When he'd inquired about it, she'd stammered something about family and quickly shifted the topic. Richard accessed his security footage from the past week. There was Alina arriving at 8, working efficiently throughout his house. But at lunchtime, she'd spent 20 minutes browse expensive jewelry websites on her phone. Diamond earrings, tennis bracelets, items that cost more than he compensated her in 6 months. The pieces formed a familiar pattern. They always began subtly, arriving late, departing early, mysterious phone calls. Then came the larger maneuvers. Missing items, forged checks, empty bank accounts. His phone buzzed with a text. Working late tonight. Do not wait up. Alina. Richard set down his glass. Working late where? Performing what? He'd granted her the evening off. He seized his keys and headed for the garage. His black luxury vehicle would seamlessly blend into city traffic. Alina took the bus. He'd followed that routine previously to ensure she reached home safely. But tonight, he'd ascertain her true destination after work. The evening was cool, and Richard felt his heart rate escalate as he drove toward Alina's usual bus stop. He assured himself this concerned safeguarding his assets, learning from past errors, being shrewd instead of naive. But as he spotted Alina's fair braid boarding the 47 bus, shopping bag still in her hands, Richard pondered if he was about to uncover another betrayal, or if he was finally succumbing to paranoia. Regardless, tonight he would ascertain the truth. Richard maintained a distance of 3 cars back as the bus navigated through the city's evening traffic. His hands clenched the steering wheel, sweat beading on his forehead despite the cool October air. Every red light felt like an eternity as he observed Alina's silhouette through the bus windows. The bus halted in City Square, and Alina alighted, still carrying those shopping bags. Richard parked across the street and watched her walk toward a dilapidated building with faded Spanish script on the front. His pulse quickened. This was it, The moment he'd apprehend her in whatever scheme she was orchestrating. Alina pushed through glass doors beneath a sign that read Hope Center. Richard frowned. A community hub? He crept closer, remaining in the shadows. Through the large windows, he could see Alina setting down her bags and embracing an elderly woman. Then she moved to the front of a room filled with about 20 older adults, all holding notebooks and pencils. "Good evening, everyone," Alina's voice carried through the thin walls. "Tonight, we're going to practice ordering food at restaurants." Richard blinked. She was instructing. For the next hour, he watched Alina patiently assist elderly immigrants in practicing English phrases. She smiled more in those 60 minutes than he'd witnessed in 8 months of her employment. When a man struggled with pronunciation, she knelt beside his chair and gently corrected him. When a woman appeared frustrated, Alina squeezed her shoulder and encouraged her in Spanish. After class, Alina unpacked her shopping bags, groceries, but not for herself. Sandwich provisions, fruit, crackers. She prepared plates of food for her students, conversing with them as they ate. Richard stumbled backward, his world tilting. The $500 wire transfer. The early departures. The telephone conversation about needing more money. It all now made sense, but not in the way he'd anticipated. He drove home in a daze, Alina's joyful face etched into his memory. In his office, he researched the Hope Community Center online, a nonprofit serving the city's immigrant population. English classes, legal aid, job training, childcare, all operated on donations and volunteers. The center's website displayed photographs of Alina teaching, Alina organizing food drives, Alina reading to children. In every picture, she radiated purpose. Richard located the center's financial reports. They were struggling, operating month to month on meager donations. The building required repairs. Programs were being curtailed. He reflected on Alina working 3 jobs, his house, a cleaning service downtown, and weekend shifts at a grocery store. Also, she could afford to volunteer here every night, nourishing people from her own pocket. His phone rang. "Liam again. Discover anything interesting on your surveillance mission?" Richard rubbed his face. "I'm an imbecile. What happened?" "She's not stealing from me. She's good, Liam. Genuinely good. The money she dispatches home, it's for her mother's medical expenses. The early departures, she volunteers at an immigrant center every night. The expensive jewelry she was observing, likely dreaming, like everyone else." Silence on the other end. Then Liam's gentle voice. "When was the last time you encountered someone genuinely virtuous?" "I don't believe I ever have." The next morning, Richard found himself timing his coffee break to coincide with Alina's arrival. She seemed surprised to see him in the kitchen. "Good morning, Mr. Thorne. I'll get out of your way. Actually, could you join me? I'd like to hear about your evening classes." Alina froze, a dish towel in her hands. "My what?" "Your volunteer work. Teaching English." Her face went pale. "I don't know what you signify." "Alina," Richard sat down, his mug in hand, "I followed you last night." She sank into a chair, appearing defeated. "Are you going to discharge me?" "Discharge you? Why would I discharge you?" "Because I misrepresented about working late. Because I utilized my lunch break to procure food for the center instead of eating. Because I've been preoccupied thinking about my students when I should be concentrating on your residents." Richard stared at this woman who believed compassion constituted grounds for dismissal. "Tell me about them, your students." Alina looked up cautiously. "They're mostly elderly. Some have resided here for decades, but never properly learned English. Maria is 73 and desires to converse with her physician without her granddaughter translating. Carlos worked in construction for 40 years, but cannot interpret safety signs. They are proud individuals who simply need an opportunity." As Alina spoke, her face transformed. The quiet, careful housekeeper vanished, replaced by someone passionate and vibrant. "The center might close," she continued. "We can barely afford rent. I attempt to contribute supplies when I can, but—" She gestured helplessly. That afternoon, Richard made an anonymous donation to the Hope Community Center, $50,000, sufficient to sustain them for months. He used a shell corporation and a fictitious name, ensuring it could not be traced back to him. But as he submitted the donation, Richard realized something had shifted within him. For the first time in years, his money felt purposeful. Someone donated $50,000. Alina burst into the kitchen the next morning, her eyes bright with excitement. Can you believe it? The center is rescued. Richard looked up from his coffee, concealing his smile. That's wonderful news. Any idea who? Shoo. They simply stated they believed in our mission. Alina practically bounced as she unpacked her cleaning supplies. We can repair the heater, purchase new textbooks, perhaps even initiate a computer class. Maria wept when I informed her. Watching Alina's joy, Richard felt something warm unfold in his chest. When was the last time he'd made someone this content? Over the following weeks, Richard found himself contriving reasons to be at home during Alina's work hours. He'd emerge from his office needing coffee just as she was dusting the living room. He'd recall urgent emails to transmit from the kitchen while she prepared his lunch. Their conversations grew longer and more personal. Alina told him about her thesis on economic disparity, her aspirations of becoming a social worker, her homesickness for El Salvador. Richard shared carefully selected anecdotes about his business, his travels, his solitude in the grand residence. Do you not possess family? Alina inquired one chilly afternoon as she arranged fresh flowers in his dining room. My parents perished when I was 22. A quel accident. Alina's hands stilled. I am sorry. That must have been dreadful. It was, but instructed me to be self-reliant. Richard paused, then added quietly, perhaps too self-reliant. Family is not merely blood, Alina said gently. At the center, we are all family. Mrs. Chun provides soup for everyone. Mr. Rodriguez repairs things without being requested. We attend to each other. Richard envied that sense of belonging. His world comprised business associates, employees, and individuals who sought something from him. Even Liam, his closest confidant, was technically on his payroll. In December, Richard made another anonymous donation to the center, computers for the new laboratory Alina had mentioned. He observed through news reports as the community celebrated, Alina beaming as she cut the ribbon. You appear altered recently, Liam observed during their weekly meeting. Happier. Doi. You're smiling more, and you haven't conducted a background check on anyone in weeks. Richard deflected with business discourse, but Liam was correct. The persistent suspicion that had plagued him for years felt less urgent. Alina's presence in his home brought a warmth he hadn't realized he'd been lacking. One chilly morning in January, Richard found Alina at his kitchen table, surrounded by textbooks and papers. Apologies, Mr. Thorne. I arrived early to make up time. I have a thesis meeting later. What is your thesis about? Alina's face illuminated. Barriers to social mobility in immigrant communities. I am researching how language access, job training, and community support can break cycles of poverty. Richard sat down across from her, genuinely interested. What have you discovered? For the next hour, Alina explained her research with a passion and intelligence that impressed him. She spoke about systemic inequalities, about families working multiple jobs but still struggling, about the inherent dignity of people who simply needed opportunity. Most individuals do not perceive it, she stated. They see someone cleaning their house or working in a restaurant and presume that's all they're capable of. But Carlos, he was an engineer in El Salvador. Isabella ran her own bakery. They're brilliant individuals reduced to survival jobs because their credentials do not transfer. Richard felt a pang of guilt, remembering his own assumptions about Alina. I wish to alter that, she continued. Create programs that acknowledge people's skills, assist them in building upon what they already know instead of commencing from zero. That's incredible work, Alina. She blushed. It's merely research. Likely won't change anything. Do not utter that. You are already changing things at the center. Their eyes met across the table, and Richard felt something shift between them. Alina looked away first, gathering her papers. I should commence my duties. That afternoon, Richard made a decision. Alina, I'd like to offer you a full-time position. Enhanced salary, health benefits, paid vacation. You would essentially manage the household, coordinate with other staff, handle my schedule, that sort of arrangement. Alina stared at him. That's extremely generous. But I do not comprehend. You barely trusted me to dust your books. I trust you, Richard said, and realized he meant it. You are intelligent, responsible, and you care about performing tasks correctly. The salary would be sufficient to assist her mother and fund her education. Alina bit her lip. May I deliberate on it? Of course. But Richard could discern the conflict in her eyes. More money signified security for her family, but it also meant less time for the center, less time for her studies, less time for the work that truly brought her alive. A week later, Alina found him in his office. I have decided about the job offer. Richard looked up from his computer, his heart racing. I am grateful, Mr. Thorne, genuinely. But I cannot accept. Why not? Alina took a deep breath. Because I would be living someone else's dream instead of my own. The center needs me. My studies matter to me. And honestly, she met his eyes, I've become fond of someone impossible. And accepting this job would make me feel as though I am betraying that sentiment. Richard felt the world tilt. Someone impossible? Someone who embodies everything I desire to achieve with my life? Someone who inspires me to be better, to accomplish more, to aid people? But our worlds are too disparate. It could never work. Richard, I should depart, she said quickly. This is too personal. I apologize. As Alina hurried out, Richard stared after her, stunned. She was fond of someone else. Someone who inspired her. Someone who shared her values. Someone who was not him. For the first time since his parents passed, Richard felt his heart truly fracture. Richard spent the weekend in his office, staring at spreadsheets, but perceiving nothing. Alina was fond of someone else. Someone impossible who inspired her to assist people. Probably another volunteer at the center. Someone young, idealistic, someone who comprehended her world. Monday morning, Alina arrived as usual, but the easy warmth between them was gone. Richard kept their interactions brief and professional. Good morning, he said without looking up from his newspaper. Good morning, Mr. Thorne. Her voice was careful, distant. The week crawled by in painful politeness. Richard buried himself in work, taking calls in his office, consuming lunch at his desk. Alina cleaned around him like a specter, efficient and invisible. Friday afternoon, she knocked on his office door. Mr. Thorne, I need to tender my resignation. Richard looked up, his stomach dropping. Your resignation? 2 weeks. I am sorry for the short notice, but I need to focus on completing my thesis. I've been accepted into a graduate program for social work, and I commence my practicum in March. I see. Richard kept his voice level. Congratulations. That's quite an accomplishment. Thank you. Alina fidgeted with her cleaning supplies. I will ensure everything is perfect before I go. I can assist in training my replacement if you'd prefer. That won't be necessary. The silence stretched between them. Alina nodded and turned to leave. Alina, she paused at the door. I'm proud of you. What you are achieving, it matters. Her shoulders sagged slightly. Thank you, Mr. Thorne. That means more than you know. The next 2 weeks were agonizing. Richard found himself memorizing Alina's routines. Knowing each day brought him closer to losing her completely. He helped her prepare for job interviews, composing glowing recommendation letters that felt like love letters he'd never dispatch. The City Community Services office telephoned. He informed her Wednesday of her final week. They wished to schedule a second interview. Alina's face brightened. Truly? That's my ideal employment. Working directly with immigrant families, assisting them in navigating services. You'll be perfect for it. Richard meant it, even as his heart fractured a little more. Thursday evening, Alina stayed late to finish organizing his files. Richard brought her coffee and found her weeping quietly at his kitchen table. What's amiss? She wiped her eyes quickly. Nothing. Just weary. Richard, it's foolish, she stated. I am departing to pursue my aspirations, which is what I desired. But I'm going to miss this. Our conversations, feeling like someone cares about my endeavors. Richard sat down across from her. Someone does care. Someone always will. Their eyes met, and for a moment Richard considered revealing everything. about following her that night, about the donations, about how she transformed his entire worldview, about how he'd become fond of her kindness, her passion, her brilliant intellect. Instead, he inquired, "The individual you mentioned, the impossible one, have you conveyed to him your sentiments?" Alina shook her head. "What is the purpose? We originate from different realms. He never perceived me as anything more than—" She gestured helplessly. "Then what? Then what am I? Someone who cleans residences and possesses nothing." "Alina, you are not nothing. You are extraordinary." She smiled sadly. "You are kind to state that." Friday arrived too soon. Alina completed her final tasks and packed her supplies. Richard had prepared an envelope with her final remuneration and a substantial bonus, sufficient to cover her mother's medical expenses for a year. "This is excessive," Alina stated, staring at the check. "You've been invaluable to me. Consider it a graduation present." Alina's eyes filled with tears. "I do not know what to articulate." "State you'll maintain contact. Inform me of your progress." "Of course." They stood in his entryway, neither wishing to utter farewell. Finally, Alina stepped forward and embraced him briefly. "Thank you for everything, Mr. Thorne. You've been more than an employer. You've been a friend. Take care of yourself, Richard." After she left, Richard walked through his house. Everything was spotless, perfectly organized, and utterly empty. He'd returned to his fortress, but now the walls felt like a prison. Over the next 3 months, Richard reverted to old habits. He employed a new housekeeper, an efficient woman named Ms. Brenda, who performed excellent work and never lingered for conversation. He immersed himself in business, finalizing deals and accumulating wealth that felt meaningless. But he could not cease contemplating Alina. He continued his anonymous contributions to the Hope Community Center, observing their programs expand. He researched city community services and felt pride when he learned Alina had been hired as a social worker specializing in immigrant family services. Through Liam's discreet inquiries, he learned she'd completed her thesis with honors and was excelling in her new role. She'd relocated to a superior apartment and was able to bring her mother to the city for an extended visit. "She's performing well," Liam reported over lunch. "By all accounts, she adores her new employment." "Good," Richard said. "That's what she desired. What about what you desire?" Richard pushed food around his plate. "It does not matter what I desire. She's not married, you know. Still single." "Richard, I'm merely suggesting perhaps the impossible isn't as impossible as you think." But Richard knew better. Alina had discovered her path, surrounded by individuals who shared her passion for justice and service. She did not require a paranoid millionaire disrupting her new existence. Still, when the invitation arrived for the Hope Community Center's annual fundraising gala, Richard found himself staring at it for a long time. Alina would be present. The invitation mentioned she'd be receiving an accolade for her volunteer service. Against his better judgment, Richard RSVP'd yes. He told himself he simply wished to witness her triumph, to observe her happiness from a distance. But as the date approached, Richard realized he was hoping for something more, an opportunity to discern if the connection they'd shared had been genuine or merely his imagination. Richard stood in his walk-in closet, gazing at rows of expensive suits. The fundraising gala was tonight, and he'd altered his decision about attending at least 6 times in the past week. "You're overthinking this," Liam said from the doorway. "It's a charitable event. You attend, you write a check, you depart. What if she believes I am pursuing her? What if she's pleased to see you?" Richard pulled out a navy suit. "She has progressed, Liam. New employment. New existence. I am ancient history. You won't know unless you attend." Across town, Alina stood in her small apartment bathroom, applying lipstick with trembling hands. The community center's gala felt surreal. 6 months prior, she was volunteering in the evenings after cleaning residences. Tonight, she was receiving an honor for her service. "You appear beautiful, Lena," her mother said from the doorway. Isabella Suarez had arrived from El Salvador 2 weeks prior, finally healthy enough to travel after her surgery. "Imanxias, Mama." "Why? You have merited this recognition." Alina couldn't explain that she kept hoping Richard would somehow be present. Ridiculous, of course. Why would a tech mogul attend an immigrant community center's fundraiser? Narrate again about this man you were employed by, her mother said, settling on Alina's bed. Mama, I have recounted it 100 times. Humor an old woman. You always smiled when you discussed him. Alina sighed. He was kind. Solitary, I believe. We conversed about my work, my aspirations. He made me feel as though what I was doing mattered. And you loved him. Alina met her mother's knowing eyes in the mirror. It does not matter. We originated from disparate realms. Love does not concern itself with realms, Lena. The whole community center had been transformed. String lights hung from the ceiling. Tables draped in white linens filled the main room, and a small stage was prepared for the evening's program. Alina arrived early to assist with final preparations. There's our guest of honor, called Maria, the elderly woman from Alina's first English class, who now volunteered as a translator for newer immigrants. I cannot believe they are bestowing an award upon me, Alina said, adjusting a centerpiece. You preserve this place, said Carlos, the former engineer who now instructed basic computer skills. That anonymous contribution came right after you commenced working here full-time as a volunteer. Coincidence? I think not. Alina had pondered about the timing herself. The initial donation had arrived just after she'd mentioned the center might close. The second had appeared days after she spoke about needing computers. But anonymous benefactors were common for nonprofits. It was simply opportune timing. Guests began arriving at 6. Alina mingled, catching up with former students and their families. The room filled with the warm chatter of multiple languages, children running between tables, and the laughter of people celebrating their community. At 7:30, Alina was greeting a family near the entrance when she saw him. Richard stood in the doorway, scanning the room. He wore a perfectly tailored navy suit and looked as elegant and out of place as she'd anticipated. Their eyes met across the crowded room, and Alina's breath caught. He was here, actually here. Richard felt his heart slam against his ribs as Alina stared at him from across the room. She looked stunning in a simple black dress, her hair pinned up, a genuine smile illuminating her face as she conversed with families around her. This was her world, warm, inclusive, full of purpose. He did not belong here, but he could not compel himself to depart. Mr. Thorne? Richard turned to find an elderly man approaching with a warm smile. Carlos Mendez. Alina has informed us so much about you. She has. Of course. You were extremely kind to her when she was employed by you. She spoke of you frequently. Before Richard could respond, the evening's program began. Alina was called to the stage to receive the Volunteer of the Year award. As she accepted the small crystal plaque, Richard felt pride swell in his chest. This community saved me as much as I've attempted to serve it, Alina stated into the microphone. When I first came to this nation, I felt invisible. Here, I learned that everyone possesses value. Everyone has something to contribute. We also have an anonymous benefactor to thank, someone whose generosity has allowed us to expand our programs and serve more families. Whoever you are, you've shown us that kindness emanates from unexpected places, and sometimes angels appear when we need them most. Richard's hands clenched in his lap. She still did not know. After the program, Richard remained in his corner, observing Alina laugh with families, embrace former students, and radiate with the confidence of someone who'd discovered her calling. Several times she glanced in his direction, but she was always drawn away by well-wishers. Finally, as the evening concluded, Alina approached him. Mr. Thorne, I cannot believe you are present. Congratulations on your award. You merit the recognition. Thank you. Alina fidgeted with her plaque. This is unexpected. I didn't think charity galas were your preference. They're not usually, but this cause seemed worth supporting. Before Alina could respond, her phone rang. She glanced at the screen, and her face brightened. Mama, how was your doctor's appointment? She switched to Spanish, speaking rapidly while Richard waited. After a few minutes, she hung up, beaming. Good news? He inquired. The best. My mother's cancer is officially in remission. She's been residing with me since her surgery, and today the doctor said she's completely healthy. Alina's eyes filled with happy tears. I've been so anxious, and now. That's wonderful, Alina. You must be relieved. I am. And grateful. An anonymous benefactor assisted in paying for her treatment. I've been striving to locate them to thank them properly. Without that help, I do not know what would have transpired. Richard felt his throat tighten. She was expressing gratitude to him without knowing it, and he'd never felt more like a coward. Alina, he began, then stopped. How could he elucidate without sounding as though he'd been manipulating her life from the shadows? What is it? Richard looked into her warm brown eyes and made a decision that would alter everything. There's something I need to inform you.